Hey everyone, today it's time for another Q&A. As always, I collect the questions over on my Discord. If you're not part of that yet, link is in the description for that. And also on the YouTube post that I made a couple of days ago. So let's just jump right into it with the first one. What is your favorite waifu? Now, if you mean with what, as in like a type of waifu, like a normal human, cat girl, like mecha waifu, whatever, I'd say just a normal one. If you're wondering who it is, I have no idea, because there's too many good waifus out there. That I wouldn't be able to pick and choose. Next up, Firo. Which Lalafell from the Thaumaturgist Guild is your favorite? I actually have no idea, because back in Aram Reborn and Heavensward, I was a cutscene skipper. So all of those cutscenes I just skipped. I don't know any of the Lalafells in there by name. So I definitely don't have a favorite one either. Like, I did go back to rewatch all of the MSQ cutscenes, like back before Stormblood started. Like, I literally shut myself in my room for 3 days, just like looking at the Unending Journey or whatever it's called, rewatching all the MSQ cutscenes, but I didn't watch any of the job quest cutscenes, etc. So that's why I do not have a favorite Lalafell from in there. Maybe I should go and have a look sometime. Then Ichigo, what's your opinion on the Savage raid tier? Actually quite positive for the most part. There's only one fight where I have some negative things to say about, I guess, which is P4. But P1 was really good. Coming in from normal mode, I was kind of scared that this was going to be another Alteroid, where it was going to be super easy. While it is still a relatively simple fight in general, Intemperance was kind of like a roadblock for a lot of people, I think, especially my group as well. Which is why we went back on Friday to clean up that fight a little bit. So it was quite surprising that they actually made it a bit interesting, like coming from normal mode. And I think it's a good entry point as well for those that are new getting into raiding, because with Endwalker there were a lot of new players coming in, so this raid tier is also going to be the first Savage raid tier experience for a lot of new players coming in, and I think this is a really good starting point. P2, I was very impressed with what they did with the arena. Like, again, normal mode made me very excited to see what they would do with it on Savage, and they definitely did not disappoint, so pretty happy with that fight as well. P3, please don't do that again with the tank busters and the tethers. Like, tethers in this game are very bad in terms of like picking them up, and just making a tank buster mechanic that comes back so often with these tethers is just kind of annoying. Outside of that, I feel like the fight itself is fine. I quite like the thematic as well, with the Phoenix and the rebirth and such. Like, the ad phase is kind of cool. And then of course later into the fight you also kind of become a Phoenix, because you die with the Death's Design debuff and then you like heal up again, which is kind of like you being reborn. Would have been cool if we would have gotten some kind of a damage buff from it, or something at least. Kind of like we got in Shiva Savage when you did the ad phase correctly. It would have been cool if we got a buff for that as well, like when everybody reaches full HP, the debuff turns into like a small buff for 10 seconds that gives you 1% like bonus damage or something. Nothing too major, but just like something to add into this thematic. For P4, while I did think the fight was really cool, there are two things I didn't like too much about it. So for the door boss, first of all, why does there have to be repeat mechanics again? Like, I praised them with Eden's Promise that this is a door boss done right, because it's a complete fight from start to finish, whereas our new door boss in P4 is just going to be repeating setting the scene twice, and it just feels like there's no reason for him to do that a second time. Towards the end of the phase, so I thought that was kind of unfortunate. Another thing I have is that some of the mechanic solving just didn't make sense. When he does the, what's it called again? Like the role selection, like he gives you a role, acting DPS, acting tank, that kind of stuff. Why is it that me as a tank, if I have acting DPS, why do I need to take a DPS orb? And then I lose the debuff, and then I take a DPS orb again. It just doesn't make sense. Like, if there was nothing to do with the debuffs, then it makes sense, because I grab a DPS orb twice as a tank player. But if I am acting as a DPS, why is my first orb a DPS orb? It just doesn't make sense. So that's why I wasn't too big of a fan of that either. Going into phase 2, it was kind of disappointing that there was no music change, because we've always had that. Like, the transitions felt impactful and they were really cool, whereas here the music just keeps playing and Hesperos, or whatever his name is, just does kind of his thing and transforms. So it just felt kind of odd that there was no music to accompany this. Phase 2 was a really cool fight in terms of like how he shows you all the mechanics, and then he tethers to those mechanics to show you in which order things are going to be resolving. So that was really cool, but again, just like with phase 1, why does the final mechanic have to repeat twice for no other reason than just making the fight longer? Of course, as we get more gear, we're going to be skipping that second iteration of both of the mechanics, of both setting the scene as well as curtain call or whatever that thing is called. But still, like right now, it doesn't really feel that good, and it just feels a bit out of place. It feels like the fight could have ended a few minutes earlier. Next up, when are you going to carry me through P3S and P4S? PF ain't it. Probably never, because I don't really do party finder stuff. I only raid with my static, and that's pretty much it. Maybe I'd sub in for like a friends group here or there every now and then, but for the most part I just raid log with my static, and that's it. Especially in 2 weeks when Lost Ark comes out, because then I'm gonna have no time to do other activities. Kazeshindo, what changes are you hoping to see in the rebalance 6.08, I believe, which is coming tomorrow, by the way. It was supposed to be in February, but because there's a lot of changes that need to happen quite soon, because like job balance right now is not good, they're going to be doing it tomorrow. So actual answer you'll get tomorrow. What changes that I am hoping for personally is Paladin needs to get a DPS buff. It's not too far behind on Warrior anymore, but I would like it to at least be on par with Warrior, because right now Gunbreaker and Dark Knight are kind of like the DPS tanks, but I feel like that's okay, because their defensive toolkit is worse than Warrior and Paladin, so I don't mind if those two are behind a little bit in DPS, because they provide more to the party. But Paladin is just a bit too far behind. Outside of those, I feel like the healers are fine. Maybe like change the cooldown on Lilybell a little bit, like make it 2 minutes instead of 3. But DPS wise, I don't see them adjusting anything. For our melees, Dragoon and Samurai, I believe, are getting buffed. All of the ranged should just get buffs, period. And then Summoner, Black, and I think all the casters are probably getting buffed as well, because Summoner is underperforming quite a lot, and Black Mage is also mentioned that it would get some buffs. So that is what I'm kind of expecting to see tomorrow. But I'll make a video on that anyways, like going over the balance changes. Then Goose, what is love? Baby, don't hurt me no more. Yeah, I don't know. I've been single for most of my life, and what little relationships that I did have never lasted very long, so I'm looking for that answer myself as well. You'll have to ask someone else. Then, next up, what are your opinions on the idea of difficulty impacting job balance? This is part of the premise of the physical ranged tags. I'm curious how you feel as someone who plays ranged sometimes. I'm actually gearing up Dancer as my second job this raid year, so that's going to be like my alt job that I'll probably be playing here or there. I don't like it. So while I do understand where they're coming from, like for example, the ranged physical are very powerful at the lower level of play, because a lot of people at that level don't know how to keep full melee uptime, or they lose a lot of casts if they're playing a caster, whereas physical range doesn't have to deal with all of that. But then on the flip side, at the high level of play, where people do know how to have melee uptime and do know how to keep casting, that's where physical range feels very underpowered. So while I do agree that difficulty of play should impact the DPS output that you get, but it shouldn't be too much. Like, look at our tanks, for example. Gunbreaker and Dark Knight are probably the hardest tanks to play at the moment, because they just have so many off-global cooldowns, they have a very busy rotation, and they also deal the most damage. And then we have Warrior and Paladin, who are a lot easier to play below that. Now, of course, I know that Paladin right now is in a bit of a bad spot, but if they were to bring the DPS up to Warrior's level, then I would be happy with it. And then Gunbreaker, Dark Knight are like, I think they're 200 DPS ahead at the moment of Warrior, and then you have Warrior, Paladin, who are easier to play. I feel if they were to take that and put it with the other jobs as well, where you still feel like you spending the time to learn a job and actually play it well gets rewarded, even if it's not too much DPS, because I still like a balanced game, of course, but I want everything to be viable as well. So yes, I think difficulty of play should impact the damage output a little bit that they have, or like even raid DPS output, like for example with Dancer and Astrologian, because I know most of their DPS comes from the raid DPS that they provide. But I do believe it should be somewhat like shown, I guess you could say. Like, you putting in the time and effort to play that job should be shown. I don't want to press like 40 CPM trying my hardest to play Gunbreaker, and then a Warrior just goes Felcleave, go brr, and does more damage than me. Yeah, that doesn't feel good. So I do want some impact on that you get a bit more DPS, but not too much to the extent where difficult jobs are the only viable jobs to play in the game. Then, Rijo, what's your favorite evolution and why is it Flareon? Actually, back when I still played Pokemon, I think the last evolution that I had was a Jolteon. When I looked at the different EVs that are available, I actually don't know all of them. Like the last ones that I know of that were added in the game were like Leafeon and Glaceon, I think the name is. And if I had to choose out of all of them, I'll probably choose Glaceon, because that one looks kind of cute. Flareon does look good, very fluffy, but I don't think it's my favorite. I actually don't know for sure. Then Kion, will you ever do a Genshin Impact review / guide or get into it? I actually think that I did a Genshin Impact first impressions or review when the game first came out, like 1.5 years ago at this point, I think. So I did do something like that. In terms of guides, that's probably never happening. I'm probably also not going to be making much Genshin content on the channel, period, because the Genshin Impact videos do very badly on the channel. And while I do like to throw in some videos here and there of stuff that I just personally want to do and not something that I think will do well on the channel, it is something that I am conscious of. And if I know that something is going to do very bad and that probably wouldn't change over time either, then I'm also not really that encouraged to make it, because with the way the YouTube algorithm works, it's better for me to not upload a video than upload a video that gets very few views, because that screws with the algorithm. So that's why you'll probably never see Genshin Impact videos, and if you do, it won't be that many of them. It'll just be here or there every now and then. Moving on, did you ever cry at the story? I'm not sure if I actually like full on cried at any point, but I did get very emotional at some points. The most emotional I got was at the end of Shadowbringers, when you're standing on the bridge with Emet-Selch and it's like, I challenge you, Emet-Selch, and then the music kicks in and you summon the other warriors of light from the different stars. That was like, oh my god, that's so good. That definitely gave me goosebumps and made me tear up, but full-on crying, I'm not quite sure if that ever happened. I don't think so, but there have been some points where it got very emotional and I definitely teared up. Then, moving on, hey Mike, what's your goals for the channel in 2022? Just trying to keep it going on the path that it is going right now. Like with Endwalker, my channel grew quite a bit and the views also went up quite a bit, and I'm just curious to see if this is something that I can keep going. I've been doing this for quite some time now. I've been wanting to see if this is something that I can do long term, because right now with Corona and such, having a normal job isn't really the most fun thing with like, oh, going into work, now it's work from home, wearing a mask all the time, like all of these other preventive measures. Having a normal job is not really the most fun thing, which is why I've been trying this YouTube thing. And I guess with 2022, I want to see if there's some kind of longevity in there as well, because right now I do not make enough money from YouTube for this to actually be like a full-time job, but it is definitely getting close to that point where it could be. So I guess that's the goal for 2022, see if it actually could be something that is worth my time in the long run. Then Blank, what's your opinion on data center travel being region locked? It's something that I don't really mind too much, because I was kind of expecting it to be the case in the first place. So I'm just gonna be happy that I can go and visit my friends on the Light data center now without needing an alt there, because I do have an alt on the Light data center, but that has not been touched since I put it there. So it's gonna be nice that I'll at least be able to play with those people again, because it's been years at this point that we've been able to do stuff together. So I'm looking forward to that. They also mentioned that cross-region data center travel would technically be possible. So if there was enough feedback, then they might consider changing that. So that's why I don't mind it too much that it's just within our own region at the moment. It's already much better than what we had before. And then with, of course, the option that we might get it in the future, cross-region travel, I don't really mind it too much, and I'm just happy with what we got right now. Then Puffle Duffle, thoughts on current state of Ninja? I know you had some on release, but what about the changes? Quite like the changes. Like the Raiju felt really bad, because it's like, okay, just pressing the same button 6 times back to back, and it's all gap closers as well. So them changing it to just be one button now, like you can make a choice between the gap closer or the normal melee skill. So that's a very good change. It also makes it so that keeping your Huton up isn't too bad anymore, or not as tight anymore as it was before. And then the change to the Phantom Kamaitachi is also nice, because I like the skill for the flexibility that it had in terms of like being able to use it as a ranged skill instead of like using your throwing daggers. So I think that's really nice as well, making it more flexible than it already was. So I think current Ninja is quite cool. Haven't had the chance to play around with it too much in an actual fight, like it was just on a dummy that I did when the changes went live, and I was like, oh, this feels good. But who knows? I'll probably play it some more in the future when I have more time for it. And then, yeah, we'll see. Maybe I'll do a follow-up video on like my thoughts on the changed ninja or something like that. And who knows, maybe they change it tomorrow a bit as well, because I wouldn't be surprised if they give it some DPS buffs. Although I do know that tomorrow is only going to be numerical changes, and the big changes are going to be coming in 6.1. Then, what is the dog doing? I have no idea. I have a cat and a gecko, I don't own a dog, so yeah, no idea. Yusef, you think as hard as a class is, the much it should be awarded with damage. For example, Black Mage is hard, so it gets a lot of damage. Same goes for Dark Knight. I guess I already sort of answered this in the previous one. Yeah, I do think that the harder a class is to play, it should be awarded with some extra DPS, but never to the point where the easier jobs become like not viable to play at endgame anymore. Or at least for like stuff like Ultimate and Week 1 raiding, because that's where balance matters. Like right now, take whatever you want. Like take 4 physical range, you'll still be fine and meet the DPS check. But for like Week 1 raiding and Ultimate raids, I want everything to be viable. So yes, there should be a bit of difference, but not to the point where other jobs just aren't viable anymore. Then a question from YouTube. Maskifale asks, have you done all the role quests for Endwalker yet? And if so, which was your favorite? Love the content, man. Keep up the great work. First off, thank you. Second off, yes, I have done all of the role quests. I've done all the quests in Endwalker at this point. As for which one was my favorite, the only one that is really still in my mind is the one that was in Gridania, which I think was for the healers. The other role quests I've kind of forgot about at this point already, so that is probably my favorite, as that is the one that I still sort of remember. Then Shepard, what do you think about padding and the solution for P3 Savage? So padding is something that I've never been a fan of. If you don't know what padding is, it's playing in a way to increase your numbers that normally would not have been the case, I guess you could say. The main reason why I am very against padding is because it just doesn't show your actual skill, and it's all artificial data basically. Like for example, back in Stormblood, when I was really into log running and speed killing, I was never able to get a good parse on 05 Savage, which was Phantom Train, and that is because it had an ad phase. And I also played Warrior back then, and Warrior was very bad for padding in that fight, because normally Warrior would go into the cabin, release an ad to make the ad phase easier, whereas if you let a Warrior pad on the ads before the cabin, they would literally do 2000 more DPS than any other Warrior that just played normally. So I am someone that doesn't like padding because I want to get good logs by playing well. I don't want my numbers to be boosted artificially because I get to AoE down some ads while the rest of my team is just jerking off in the corner. That's something that I'm not into. The solution for P3 Savage, I don't like either, like them taking it out, because now it also promotes bad play. Like a lot of people are holding cooldowns on the ads so that they can use them when the boss comes back, because that way, like, it shows on your parse. Because if you don't know what happened with P3 Savage, by the way, the ad phase was taken out of the logs. So if you want to speed kill, you do want to burst these ads down really quickly, because of course it's still kill time. But if you're going for a lock percentile, as in like a damage parse, you want to like drag out the ads as long as possible so that you have your potions back for when the boss is targetable again. So I really don't like this solution. And I also don't really think it was that big of a problem to begin with, because you need to burst these ads down because they have an enrage, and the enrage comes fairly quickly. And you also need to split up these ads almost immediately after they spawn. So I don't really think it was that much of an issue to begin with, because like it's not as bad as the padding that we had back in Stormblood, for example. But I guess some people really care too much about the padding thing. Again, I don't like it, but I don't necessarily think that P3 would have been a problem for that. Moving on, Pira, what do you do when your static lacks the basic knowledge of their classes and is the reason why you constantly wipe to enrages, but you can't find another static because you somehow still progressed further than anything that is searching? First thing that you could do, if it is really basic knowledge that people are lacking, is try to teach them yourself. Like for me, for example, I can play every job in the game at an average level, so I can also help everyone understand the basics of their job. And I feel like everybody else could do that as well if you put in the time. Like if you're a good player, everybody can play the jobs at their basic level, because it's really not that hard anymore with all the changes that have happened. If that's not something that is enough, I guess, there are a lot of other tools that can help you improve as well. You have guides on the balance Discord. Somebody else mentioned as well in like the Q&A that XIV analysis is a good thing as well. that you can use for that to like improve on your job. And if it really doesn't work out and people do not want to improve, or they just can't improve because they're not good enough players or whatever, find for something else. I know that regressing on prog is never fun, but if you can't get through the fight and it's just not getting better, maybe it's better to join a different group, progress through the point to where you are right now, and then like have better proc on the next fight or something like that. DPS is also something that gets fixed over time as people get more gear, so maybe just wait a week or two to see if gear solves the issue. That's another thing that you could do. Then, what are your expectations and predictions for the new Ultimate? Well, we know it's going to be the Dragon Song War, so Torden and Nidhogg are going to be in there. I've already seen a model of a boss that is going to be in there, which I'm not going to be spoiling that for those that don't want to see it or don't want to know it. But yeah, Torden, Nidhogg, I'm expecting Estinian to show up at some point as well, like maybe in his Nidhogg form. And then of course the Knights of the Round Table, or whatever they were called. Expecting those to be in there as well. Outside of that, I just want to be surprised. I haven't looked too much into it outside of seeing that one boss model. And Kion, again, who's your favorite VTuber? I'm someone that actually doesn't really watch YouTube or Twitch all that often, and because of that I don't watch VTubers either. There was a time where my friends were really into the VTuber scene, like when it was first getting started. So I did see some here or there, but I don't really know that many of them. Because I just don't watch their content, and I just don't watch much like YouTube content in general, so I don't really have a favorite one. Dynast, what is the origin of the name Ilya? So a lot of people think that my name comes from the Fate series, the anime, from Ilya's Feel, like the little girl. Not the case. I have watched Fate, but that's definitely not where my name came from, because Ilya's Feel is with 2 L's, mine is only with 1. Where my name came from is this guy right here. I'm not sure if I can like get it in frame because this is like mirrored. Yeah, there you go, Ilya Kushinov. This is an artist that I've been following for a very long time, and I've been a very big fan of his art as well. And yeah, I just liked the name Ilya. I quite like those like Slavic / I think it's Hebrew as well, names like Sasha, Ilya. I quite like those kind of names, so that's why I went with Ilya. If you're wondering where the Dalamik part came from, I used to play an Aura back in the day, and when I changed my name, because I've had like 3 different names in Final Fantasy, I think, but when I changed my name, I went with Ilya Dalamik, because Dalamik is one of the Auri tribes. If you have the Encyclopedia Eorzea, there is a list of all the tribes of the Aura, and because I played Aura back then, I wanted to have like a lore-related name, I guess you could say, so that's why I went with Dalamik. Now it doesn't make sense anymore, because I'm a potato. But yeah, so Ilya came from the artist Ilya Kupchinov, and then Dalamik comes from the Aura tribes. And Lama asks, pizza or burgers? Pizza, all the time. I don't mind burgers too much, but if I can choose, I'd eat any other piece of meat outside of a burger, so pizza it is. Then Aurora asks, 5-minute break during the vid to show us Maya, and I also saw that some people of my static were doing some kind of a show Maya summoning ritual. So I guess I'll show her. She is hanging against the back of her enclosure at the moment, so she might be a bit tough to grasp, but I'll try my best. Can't guarantee there's gonna be 5 minutes though. So she's not really the biggest fan of being picked up, but there you go. That is Maya. And before she jumps at the camera again, I'm gonna put her back. So yeah, as you can see, she's quite jumpy, but it's also because of the species that she is. Like, her species likes to jump around quite a bit on branches and that kind of stuff, which she does in her enclosure as well, but she doesn't really like to be handled that much, which is why I usually just kind of leave her be. So when I do grab her, she just jumps all over the place, as you could see. But I've had her for about 1.5 years now, I think. I got her for my birthday, which was kind of a joke between me and my family. So whenever, like, I think this has been going on for like 10 years at this point, but whenever my parents ask me, what do you want for your birthday? Like, because I'm an adult and because I make money, if I want something, I just buy it. And because of that, I was always just saying, I want a snake, because my parents really don't like reptiles, and I do. So that's why it kind of became an inside joke within our families, like, what do you want for birthday? A snake. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, we won't get that. But a few years ago, a reptile shop opened next to where my parents have their own shop as well. And sometimes, whenever they would get food deliveries, it would come in the morning, and the reptile shop wouldn't open until the afternoon. So they would often drop off the package with my parents, and then they would bring it when they closed their shop before they went home. And that's kind of how my mom got in touch with the animals and such. And then eventually, because I was like, okay, what do you want? A snake? She was like, you know what, let's just go look at the reptile shop. What are the options? Like, what does it take to take care of these kind of animals and such? And yeah, a few months later, there she was, and I've had her for about 1.5 years now. And she's kind of unrestful now because she was sleeping, because they do sleep during the day, and then during the night is when she gets active. But yeah, so that's Maya. Now everybody has seen her as well. I think I never showed her on camera before, outside of like maybe a stream or something. But yeah, now you know. I also have a cat called Tyson, but he's somewhere outside at the moment, so I can't just go grab him and show him on camera. But he usually just stays downstairs and sleeps somewhere anyways. Moving on, Dragonsong War will be the first Ultimate release since I have been playing. I have experience in all other 3 Ultimates. I've heard that the DPS checks were harder previously for older Ultimates. I was wondering if you knew how much harder it was. For example, if you know what ranking in Savage is enough to be confident in meeting the check for an unreleased Ultimate. Thanks. So, yes, the DPS checks of the older Ultimates was way harder than it is right now. It's kind of comical. Well, actually, right now I don't know, with the downscaling of stuff that happened in Endwalker. But back in Shadowbringers, the DPS check was laughable for Yukop and Uwu compared to what it was before. In terms of what you need for like a Savage ranking, I don't know, like 90 percentile, 95th percentile is probably a good guess. I know that a friend of mine cleared Alexander Ultimate as well, and his static definitely isn't that amazing in terms of players, but they did spend over half a year trying to prog it every week. So that's kind of different, I guess. But yeah, it takes people to play their jobs well. It takes people to just play well mechanically, because if you end up dying, you're probably going to just not make it in terms of the DPS check. And if you can't clear it on content, then usually a patch or 2 later, dungeon gear comes out, and then it becomes a lot easier already as well. But on content itself, people need to play on point, they need to play their jobs well, use potions, food, everything that you can do to increase your DPS, because the DPS check is very tight. Then Kazito, will you be making an alt to come hang out with your Lala girlfriend in Oceania? I have cookies. The cookies are very tempting because the people that have watched my stream know how much I like my cookies, but the answer is probably going to be no. Back when the data center split happened, as I mentioned before, I put an alt on light and I've never touched that alt since then. So I probably won't be making a new character on the Oceania server. I guess I could technically transfer my light alt, because there's gonna be like the free transfers. But even then, I know that I probably will never play it. I'd have to get it to 90 first as well. And with Lost Ark coming out, I just don't want to spend time on that. And even if I get it to 90, I probably will never play on it. So it's gonna be a pass for me. And then our last question, another one from YouTube. Besides having good and high critical hit and spell speed stat for Black Mage, for example, is low determination also bad? For example, having 2000 crit, 1400 spell speed, and extremely low determination, let's say 900 or 1000. Is this bad? Does the amount of determination increase the damage you will deal with a crit accidentally procced? I mean, we all know that critical hit stat increases the damage you will deal when you proc a crit hit, but I was wondering if determination increases your base damage by a little amount, and critical hits are also based in some way on your base damage. So does this mean that determination increases the damage for an accidentally procced crit? I searched on various pages about the math and how these stats do actually work, but the information was rather incomplete and confusing. It would be nice if you could explain it. Thanks. So, technically, yes, if you go for higher determination, your crits are also going to deal more damage, but it's always difficult because there's so much math behind this. It's all very confusing. I also don't have all the answers to this. The more crit you have, the more damage your crits will do, and also the more often that you will crit, which is why investing in crit is usually a good way to go. Determination increases your base damage, so yes, technically it increases the damage you will do with crits as well, because crits work with your base damage value to generate the crit number, but it's usually not worth it. Like, just investing in crit is usually going to be better than investing in determination. In terms of like having a balanced stat spread, it again all depends on the gear that is available and the substat tiers that you can get, because each substat has a specific tiering system, meaning that hitting specific tiers is just going to be important. And also, for example, if you have a piece and you can only put one piece of materia in there in your armor, and say that you melding crit is not going to up a tier, it might be better to meld determination or direct hit instead. But there's so much math behind all of this that I personally don't really pay too much attention to it, and I just wait for the math wizards to do their wizarding, and then I just go from there. So going over to the balance, just look at one of the best in slot builds that's out there, look at like the calculated DPS that they will do, and then just go from there. Technically, yes, to answer your question, determination does increase your critical damage, but it's just better to invest in the crit stat more often than not if you want to invest in your damage. Like usually it's crit first, the direct hit second, then determination. Unless you're playing warrior, then determination second is better. But determination and direct hit are also so close to each other right now in terms of the damage that they provide that you can basically interchange them. So for example, with me, because I want to play all of the tanks, I'm just gonna go for a crit dead build because that will still be good to play warrior as well, whereas crit direct hit will gimp my warrior quite a bit. So there is some interchangeable stuff over there, but crit is usually still the most important stat to go for. And with that, we have had all of the questions. I'll probably just do another Q&A at some point in the future. When that will be, I don't know. Might be a few weeks from now, might be like 2 months from now or something. Kind of depends on what I feel like doing and what other stuff that I'm busy with at the time. But if you want to get notified whenever I do make another one, then just head over to the link in the description to my Discord channel, because I'll always ping people there, and I'll also make a post on YouTube. But I know that not everybody sees those things. But anyways, that's gonna do it for today's video. So I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank my Patreons for their support, and I'll see you in the next one.